All right. I want to share a little bit about how Fortinet partners with AWS, works with AWS in a number of ways, one of which is a customer. I also want to talk a little bit about how we partner as an ISV partner. And then finally, how we with AWS service our customers together. So a bunch of different ways to look at how we relate and work with AWS, ultimately to provide an experience for our end customers. But we ourselves are a customer of AWS, and we use a lot of those services. And it's very often interesting to hear about how customers are consuming AWS services. So what better customer to talk about than us? And so if you don't know about Fortinet, we are a security service provider that serves more than 600,000 customers globally. We service 70% of the Fortune 100 companies, and we represent globally about 30% of all firewall shipments. And we have about 60 listings on AWS Marketplace, so we're a very significant marketplace provider. And we integrate and we rely on AWS services to enable our business in a number of ways. And I'll talk about those. My name is Aidan Walden, and I work within the cloud practice at Fortinet, and I'm going to go through that relationship. You know, as a platform customer, we rely on AWS to deliver our corporate infrastructure services, to provide baseline security on which we provide more advanced security services to service our own practice. It's provided an ability for us to scale our go-to-market activities, our research and development efforts, and to provide really fast and efficient proof of concepts that are repeatable for our customers. It's also very important into some of the SaaS delivery efforts that we provide, and I'm going to talk about that. We've gotten really good at modeling a SaaS delivery process because of AWS, and we can quickly iterate on that and deliver that time and again. As an ISV partner, we rely on a lot of services that ultimately are tied through AWS Marketplace. We rely on AWS, or we partner with AWS to market those services, to provide customer outreach and joint collaborative selling with our customers. And the integrations on that platform are very important for revenue attribution, which is also very important to us as a business. As a provider, we service our customers really by a better together strategy. We don't necessarily think that customers should be in a position where they have to choose between the first-party service and a third-party provider. There are benefits to be had from both, and we talk about that a lot. And I'll talk about how that actually works. We are an AWS partner that has many competencies, which I think are important in terms of credibility, providing customers our assurance that we can deliver services effectively and we have competency on AWS. Now, as a customer, I want to start here because this might be very interesting. Because with any enterprise, we had the same sort of challenges that you might have in your business. When we originally came to AWS, I started with the practice about 10 years ago, and we had just a handful of accounts. Everybody created a root account using your corporate email address. There was no central ownership, and it quickly grew to about 5,500 accounts. And so we had the challenge of how do we consolidate all of those accounts into a meaningful structure? Accounts payable was challenged with individual expense reports. There was no way to provide security across that footprint. So it was complete shadow IT. 5,500 accounts represented a significant risk exposure for us, even as a security provider. So we were able to really start by leveraging some of the core services that AWS provides. When you look at how we brought all of those accounts together, we were able to force all of them into an identity and access construct that allowed us to grab anything with a Fortinet.com domain. We were able then to take all of those accounts and using the organizational unit structure those in a way that could tier based on personas within the organization, certain access roles. One of the problems that we had is everybody had root access, which we've removed. We were able to integrate with our Active Directory services and use concepts like IAM and service control policies to provide very granular access across the organization. This was very important because then what we were able to do is tie that into our own workflows. So when somebody now wants to create an account on AWS, based on who they are, what cost center they're a part of, we can deliver a process or a workflow that says, hey, I would like access. Well, this is the type of access you're going to get, and it's all automated. So we have tools within our business that we've tied into the security constructs and the organizational constructs that allow us to automate that. One of the issues that we have, like any organization, is the ability to scale. And our corporate IT, our corporate security teams don't have the ability to address every one of those 5,500 account requests, and that's growing, by the way. But what we do is we tie that into automation. So when somebody submits a service account request, we see the type of request that it is, and we're using basically what we provide to our customers today, which is a service orchestration and automation capability to automate the delivery of that account service. And basically an ADFS, an assumed role is provided to that account. Each person gets their own account, so nobody's tripping over each other in the same space. We can share resources using things like Resource Access Manager across those accounts. And so it becomes a very efficient way of delivering. But one of the things that maybe people don't expect is that we also use as a foundational practice or effort is we use AWS's security services. We also think that we can do a lot of filtering at a baseline with things like guard duty and shield to filter out the noise. We still layer on inline inspection, advanced security capabilities, our own threat intelligence on top of that. But we also use those foundational services such as Amazon Inspector. AWS Guard Duty is something that we've automated against to great effect. So whenever there is an attack and we're being attacked constantly, we can see brute force attacks that maybe are a point of as an initial attack vector, where somebody's going to then maybe escalate that into something else. But Guard Duty has been very good for us. We can take that threat, and what we have is an automated function where Guard Duty alerts are sent to the account owner to say, hey, you have an SSH port that should not be opened, you need to close that. And then what we're expecting back from that email is a response through Jira, so we can monitor that, and then did somebody take the action to block that port, or did they not? And if the attack repeats, or if the response wasn't had, we know that somebody in corporate IT then needs to manually follow up. But what that did was it cut out about 95% of the manual effort in our own security practice, right? So these are good things. On the financial management side, the level of effort from accounts payable was very, very challenging. What we did was incorporate things like the billing reports to understand where we had orphaned resources. One of the challenges, we still have this challenge, but we were not doing it effectively initially, was classifying our objects and tying those to individuals. So what we wanted to do is understand cost center, where those costs sat with cost center owners. We also wanted to understand what those resources, where they were being used or not used. So we had tons of storage volumes that were unallocated. We had tons of public IPs that were unallocated, hundreds of thousands of dollars of spend that we didn't need to spend. So over time, we were able to start looking at those and using a proper data classification process, and then layering in automation built into these functions, reduce the level of effort on our accounts payable staff, cut out resources that we did not need, and just run a much better and much tighter AWS deployment. It also gave us the ability to tie in third-party services. So we do use some other partner services to enable our own capabilities on AWS, monitor our spend across all of our cloud deployments. And then once we, over time, developed a model for how much consumption that we would use, we were able to use things like reserved instances to really drive out some of the costs. We can make bets against what we thought we would spend. So very effective there. So that's Fortinet as a customer. As a partner, we had different challenges. We needed to go to market very quickly. Customers are looking to consume services without lengthy times to provision. They want to insert security services into their AWS deployments very fast. And so the AWS Marketplace experience really enabled that. We can deploy listings in a very repeatable way. We can tie those listings into our own service platforms. So if you're an ISV or looking to be an ISV yourselves, and you want to tie in a end-to-end provisioning function into your own services, that can be done in a very seamless way. The other aspect of where we started is that by our legacy, we are a multi-tier, two-tier distribution organization. We work through resellers, we work through distribution channels, and those traditional channels didn't quite align with how AWS Marketplace functions or cloud marketplaces function. One of the things that was very effective for us was, and what we needed to do was bring in our channel partners into the cloud experience. Private offers really helped us with that. We could, with Marketplace private offers, we're able to provide bundled services through our channel partners and consulting partners. There are 47 non-Fortinet listings on AWS Marketplace. So if you have a managed provider that deploys Fortinet, if you have a systems integrator that is deploying security along with other services that you have tons of options to deploy Fortinet. And using private offer models, you can tie that into your EDPs, your other commitments that you have, and leverage volume commitments and offers that are bundled with those providers. It is very hard to filter through all of the service providers in AWS. So there are about 2,600 security listings in AWS Marketplace, of which we have 60. And one of the things that customers would tell us is that it's hard to differentiate between all of these different offers, and I'm not familiar with the security space. The competency programs, I think, really did a good job for us to highlight our credibility as a network provider, as a security provider, and as a software development company. So we've got various AWS competencies that you can, if you're looking for a particular service, Fortinet will come up under these competency searches. And then it shows, what we can do. It filters out a lot of the noise from that marketplace experience. And finally, our SaaS offerings. Security, by and large, is an interest to be consumed as a SaaS service these days. We've developed 10 marketplace offers that are SaaS offerings, so no infrastructure on the part of the customer. And that really provides a lot of flexibility in how we deploy and provide a better customer experience. And so consuming all of those services allows us to provide a better service for our customer. So if, as a customer, when you work with Fortinet and AWS together, we can provide purchasing against your AWS commitments. We have an extensive library of CloudFormation and Terraform templates that you can use to automate your infrastructure provisioning, deploy them very quickly. And also flexibility in how you purchase services. And I'll talk about this in a summary later, but not everybody wants to buy a committed license up front. The ability to have flexibility in how you deploy security today versus how you deploy it tomorrow. The opportunity to pay for services on demand as you use them became very important. And we've developed our own programs that really complement the on-demand, pay-as-you-go marketplace structure. We have about 35 to 40 AWS integrations. We're highly integrated across the AWS feature set, which is very important, right? So I go back to saying, you don't have to choose between AWS and Fortinet. There's an opportunity to get better outcomes from the integrations of both of those services. We are known as a company that provides very, very high performance security, specifically inline firewall. If you know Fortinet, you've heard about our ASICs and our hardware. That pedigree has allowed us to really come up with some clever ways of using EC2 services and getting down into that what they call vector zero level of the operating system in the virtual machine functions to deliver faster and better performance. So you're getting actually more value. And I'm not going out on a limb by saying you typically get about twice the performance per CPU core on EC2 from a Fortinet deployment for firewalling than you might from other services. So we call that the virtual security processing unit. So like a virtual ASIC. So we've taken what we've done in our hardware platforms. We've done some really creative things to get better performance from cryptography and in the CPU overall. And that's something that's differentiated and a lot of value you get from both Fortinet and AWS. And then the last thing I'll point out is the WAF rules deployment. So customers really like the convenience of using the AWS WAF. Fortinet has a fantastic advanced web application firewall that I'll talk about. But for very simple deployments, you may not need more than what AWS provides in their WAF. Maybe it's a canary deployment for a new application. You don't have to choose between just the just the AWS capability and what Fortinet provides. We actually provide rule sets that you can consume through a click-through on Marketplace to add additional threat intelligence to your AWS WAF deployment. And that's just an example of how we can come together and service customers directly or jointly. Now, going back to the integrations across AWS, here are just some examples, some key services that we provide. Now, we have demonstrations in our booth of these various services that we can provide at any point in time. But what we'll be talking about are really these SaaS-based offerings, which are FortiGate Cloud Native Firewall, which is a SaaS version of our NGFW. We have FortiWeb Cloud WAF as a service. This is web API and application protection or consumed as a service. All of the benefits that we provide in our what you've known as our WAF products available on FortiWeb Cloud. We have additional services I won't get into for the sake of time, but these are for visibility and zero trust. But these are the various services really as examples. There are many, many more that we provide on AWS, but here are some of the services that we will consume or feed into for the customer benefit. Now, there's a couple of highlights that I want to really point out here. The two that I'm going to go through today, but there are three SaaS services. The first is FortiGate CNF. The key aspects and enablers of that are really the gateway load balancer. We can integrate and you can manage your Fortinet firewall from the AWS Firewall Manager. You don't have to. There's a lot of flexibility, but it's an option, right? You won't see that from other providers. With our web app and API protection, this is about providing advanced machine learning capabilities to lower the level of effort of management, to simply remove the false positives that you're typically used to in a web application firewall deployment, and really improve the efficacy of protection of specifically of web applications. And then finally, as a SaaS service, visibility is very, very important. There are a lot of visibility providers. Fortinet can partner with many of them, but we actually provide our own visibility solution. Everything starts with visibility, so I want to uncover all of the resources and provide workload exposure, things like vulnerability identification, and I can feed that into some automation construct and other services, and I can combine them maybe with my threat analytics coming from my web application and API services on FortiWeb, and I can do something with that, so we can move into remediation very, very easily. But again, a service that's tied into to native AWS functions. So if you happen to be consuming guard duty, inspector, security hub, we can consume all of those and actually make them actionable. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's jump into FortiGate CNF. Button wasn't working. Okay. FortiGate CNF is the FortiGate firewall. It's cloud native, meaning it's provided as a SaaS. We provide the same sort of protections that a customer has come to know us by. Advanced threat protection, deep SSL inspection, intrusion prevention. We tie in our AI-driven FortiGuard threat intelligence that's sourced globally. So as we look at threats that evolve in real time across the globe, we start to insert those into the firewall in near real time. The opportunity to not have any infrastructure overhead, which is massive. So we can reach into your account. We simply take the traffic from your account, your VPCs. We inspect that in any direction it happens to go, and we send the traffic back on its way in a very transparent way. And it's easy to use. All you do is simply deploy a CloudFormation template. You set a policy, and you're good to go. Now this is what it looks like for if you're more visually and technically oriented. How FortiGate CNF works is that we host in our account the inspection clusters. So we take that load off of you as a customer. You don't have to deploy the infrastructure as service. What we do is we do leverage the capability of the gateway load balancer. We put that endpoint into your VPC, and all the traffic that comes from your VPCs hits that endpoint, goes over to our tenancy for inspection, and then is sent right back on its way. Now, it's fantastic to use this from Fortinet. If you wanted to deploy your own infrastructure as service model where maybe you deployed FortiGates yourself, that's also possible, enabled by the gateway load balancer. One of the things that this is going to facilitate if you're doing migrations into cloud, or if you have legacy applications that need to be supported that are NAT insensitive as an example, this makes it very easy and very flexible to deploy both native and not so native cloud applications. We have the ability to inspect traffic really anywhere it goes. So if it goes from VPC to VPC, it can go egress out to the internet. We can support ingress traffic inspection. And again, the integration, I think, is very important. We can tie into these various services so that we can see the containers, the ephemeral containers that are coming and going in EKS. We can send logs to S3 and so forth. And in our back end, we also use RDS to database all of our customer services and customer records. So very, very native. This is a natively built AWS service. But it's an option that removes the overhead from your tenancy, your level of effort, and makes it very, very easy to deploy security. So really all you're doing is managing policy. A little bit more about how that traffic flow works. So the FortiGate CNF, we deploy the gateway load balancer endpoint. If you go down to number 2, traffic from your protected VPC is sent to that endpoint in your VPC attachment, and then it forwards to us, and so forth. So a very easy model to deploy, and simply we deploy that with an assumed role with a CloudFormation template. The next service is FortiWeb web application and API protection. This is a really different approach to legacy web application firewalls than you may have come to know if you're in that space. We've leveraged machine learning to do API discovery, to provide web protection, really to improve the efficacy and remove the false positives, to improve the tuning of the system. So the first thing that we do is we discover APIs, we discover those web service endpoints, we cluster those and categorize those so that we can properly classify and protect them. We then use the support vector machines and hidden Markov models. Essentially, it's a multifunctional or multi-stage AI service to look for protocol conformant and continually learn what sorts of traffic should be expected by the application. And then across multiple applications, we can look at the threat analytics across your entire application deployment and start to correlate attacks across multiple URLs, multiple applications. And then within bot mitigation, this is an opportunity to look at the behavioral patterns of users and maybe, not users, actual bots, and start to compare that against certain parameters and classify how the interactions are conforming with what is expected by the application. A little bit more about what that looks like. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is there's some similarities to the last SaaS model. So the SaaS models are all very similar. Within a region, we deploy a cluster. That cluster is hosted in front of your deployment, in front of your tenancy, where we can provide the inspection. The application traffic is sent through a CNAME URL. So it comes to our cluster of inspection points and is sent to the customer backend. We use various integrated services for the protecting distributed content globally. So if you are on CloudFront as a CDN, we can attach inspection to that to those different entry points. We can attach to API gateways that you may be using, or support even serverless functions. So regardless of how you deploy your application, we can deploy protection for all of those different methodologies. And then we provide a centralized dashboard. So this centralized dashboard, so no matter where or how many applications you have deployed across your global infrastructure, those applications can show up in a centralized way. Now, this is showing AWS. This service is actually available across many or multiple cloud platforms. And so in a consolidated way, I can configure inspection across multiple clouds with a consolidated view of my entire application footprint. And a little bit about the machine learning. We would have to touch on this. So traditionally, your web application firewalls would look at threat detection and match some static list. Should it be allowed or should it not be allowed? We have application traffic, normal requests are fine, but we also have traffic coming in that maybe are anomalous, right? And the static lists aren't necessarily set or capable of defining this is an anomaly versus an expected particular traffic. So what you have is you have to block everything, and we get a lot of false positives. This is where the level of effort has always been in terms of managing a web application firewall. I'm constantly tuning the system. But what we want to shift to, well, also the fact that we have false negatives too. So not only are we blocking things that we shouldn't block because somebody mistyped a password or what have you, but we also allow traffic that should have been blocked. Yep. Okay. And then finally, what we're going to do here is we're changing the model. So instead of static lists, we can move on to doing probability-based detection. So in the first stage, we're starting to classify the inputs, the parameters versus methods, what should be expected in terms of inputs, and we can start to filter out some of the unexpected inputs. Now, that doesn't block everything. We'll still have some anomalies that come through, but once the anomalies go through, we can apply additional machine learning capabilities to identify threats specifically and then block those threats, and then we only allow normal or benign traffic to go through. So this is what you'll find that's different about the modern web application firewall on FortiWeb versus what you had to do in the past. We're moving from a static model to a dynamic model that continually learns over time. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up just for the sake of time. But we've got a lot more content to go over in our booth. So I encourage you to come over to the Fortinet booth, which is right back there, and we can actually provide demos on this platform or any of the other services that we offer. Thank you very much.